Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah and in today's video I'm going to invite you to paint along with me. I recently read online that June 8th is National Sushi Day. Which nation that is referring to I cannot tell you, but reading that inspired me to paint some sushi. The tools I'm going to be using in this video are some synthetic paintbrushes, Secura Pigma Micron fineliner pens in 05 and 02, a bowl of nice clean water, and my Winsor & Newton 45 half pan watercolour palette. For the shades I'm going to be using today, I mixed myself 3 different shades of white. That sounds absolutely ridiculous and I know that. The first one is just a large quantity of Chinese white and water, and then I did the same thing but I added a drop of the shade lemon yellow into the pool so that the white took on a bit of yellow to be a warm off-white shade. Then finally added another pool of Chinese white and added a small amount of ivory black to make a cool toned off-white shade. I used 3 pink shades, Rose Madder, Permanent Rose and Alizarin Crimson, and then I used a bit of cadmium orange at a time to gradually make it more of a salmon pink and less of a Barbie pink. I made up 2 lots of this colour and I added Chinese white to one of them to make it a paler version. Finally, I used Hooker's Green Light, Hooker's Green Dark, Viridian and Phthalo Green to make a green shade, which I added some ivory black to make it darker as I saw fit. The first step was exactly the same for every painting that I'm showing you today, so I'm just going to show them all together and then I'll split them up into each piece of sushi. I started by painting the rice of each sushi with just water, and then I dotted the 3 white shades I'd mixed into the water, allowing it to bloom out and merge together. Some people might think that it's a bit unnecessary to use 3 different shades of white, but I think it adds a bit more to it than just using one flat colour, and it takes advantage of the way that watercolour works. Now that the base rice layer is done, I'm going to show you how I painted this salmon nigiri. I painted the piece of salmon on the top with just water, and then I dotted in the lightest shade of pink I mixed, spreading it evenly over the surface of the water with my brush. I then left that to dry, but I was keeping a really close eye on it. For the next step to work, I needed the paint to dry enough so that there weren't any pools of water for the next layer of paint to bleed into, but not so dry that the paint would no longer move. Using a very small brush, I drew lines across the piece of salmon with the plain white shade I mixed earlier. Once the salmon had dried completely, I painted the seaweed with the green shade I mixed before. Personally, I thought that shade of green wasn't dark enough, so I added more black to it and I went over what I'd already painted. Then, as that green was drying, I loaded my brush with water and dropped just plain water into the still wet paint. I added a tiny bit more ivory black to my cool white shade to make it greyer, and then used a small brush to paint individual pieces of rice where I wanted. Then, once all of the paint was dry, all that was left to do was outline the painting with a fineliner pen and I was done. Staying on the salmon trend, the next piece that I painted was a salmon sushi roll. The steps for this are very similar to the last one. I painted the salmon pink and then created the fat lines in the exact same way as before, and then I did the seaweed and the rice in a very similar way. So I won't describe doing the exact same thing twice, and I'll tell you that I don't actually eat much sushi. I'm a vegetarian, so fishy sushis don't really appeal to me, and I don't eat much vegetarian sushi either. I do think that the designs of them are so cool and so iconic though, which is why I thought they'd make a really interesting painting subject. I did try to research different types of sushi, to call them by the right names and to paint ingredients that would actually exist, but if any of my terminology is off then please let me know, and I apologise if it's annoying you. But now I'm just doing the line art again. I believe I used the size 05 for this since there weren't small details, and here's the finished salmon sushi roll painting. Of all of them, this prawn nigiri would be the one that I'm least likely to eat because prawns freak me out, but it was probably the one that I enjoyed painting the most actually. To begin with, I painted the prawn on top pink using the same light pink shade I used for the two previous paintings. Then I waited for that to dry completely this time before I used my green shade for the seaweed wrapped around it. From what I saw of images online, this kind of sushi, the prawn nigiri, usually doesn't have the seaweed wrapped around, but I did see some pieces that did, and I thought it would just tie the collection of 4 paintings together if they all had the seaweed. Once the green had dried completely, I used a tiny brush to apply dots of the darker pink shade to the top of each of the prawn sections. I applied them densely towards the top of the section and then did fewer dots towards the bottom of each section, so it's sort of like a gradient. And when I got to the tail bit at the bottom, I drew diagonal lines going opposite directions to emphasise that the two fins were separate. I then painted the individual rice grains in the same way as before, concentrating the darker shade to the end of the rice cuboid so that it looked shaded and 3D. And once that dried, I moved on to outlining. I outlined it the same way that I did with the others, with a fine liner in the size 05, but then I went in with a white Posca paint pen to add more dots to the prawn sections, concentrating the white at the bottom of the section and spacing the dots out more towards the top, so it creates a gradient going from red at the top of the section to pink and then to white at the bottom. I think it looks really effective. I think it looks like a prawn. But now that that's all done, I'm finished with this painting, so here is the completed prawn nigiri. The final piece of sushi that I'm painting today is a cucumber maki. It was inspired by one image I saw where it looked like it had a red sauce of some kind in it as well as the cucumber, like within the roll. And it was so vibrant and so pretty that I just had to paint it. But I've since gone back through Google Images trying to find this one specific picture so I can find out what specifically is the red sauce, but I can't find the image anywhere. I don't know if I was looking at the picture with my glasses off or something and interpreted a red blur that was actually a piece of pepper or tuna or something, but the red bit that you see me paint in a moment is just completely up to interpretation because I have no idea what it's meant to represent. To paint the cucumber in the middle, I used a small brush and dipped it straight into the shade sap green with a bit of added water, and I just used that. Following that, I used the seaweed green shade to do the skin of the cucumber. For my mysterious red blob, I first applied just water to where I wanted the red and then a little bit beyond where I wanted the red as well. Then I dipped my brush into cadmium red with a bit of water, and then I applied that to the very centre of where I wanted the red to go. The following process of dotting in red paint to water and just watching it bloom outwards resulted in the most satisfying shot of video I've ever filmed. So I'm just going to replay that clip so that we can re-watch it together. Lovely. Then to outline, I used my fine liner in the size 02 for the cucumber slices since they were quite small, and then I used the size 05 for the rest. I also whipped out my Posca paint pen for this to add in some seeds into the cucumber slices as well. If you don't feel like painting these yourself but you still want to use them in your own projects, they are available as a printable from my Etsy shop now. Check the link in the description if you'd like to see that. I hope that you've enjoyed this video or you found it a good way to inspire your creativity. If you did enjoy it, be sure to leave a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more of my videos, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, have a lovely day and goodbye!